Okay, so they all just went to lunch and I wanted to walk around and show kind of the stage of where they're at right now. Put up the walls and the insulation is going on, and they are putting this in every single area of the trailer. They're still filling in some spots, but this insulation, this is pretty thick, and they're filling in every stud. I've seen there's there's some factory tours out there where you see where, you know, they just leave gaps wherever there's like a wire or a cord or a vent. You see, like, they just, instead of, you know, cutting a hole and putting it in there, they just leave the whole thing out because it's too much work to cut a hole in it. So it's looking pretty good. I mean, you're seeing all the insulation across the whole thing on the back wall over here. Yeah, like, look at this. Like, this would be like the easy spot to like cut a corner on, right? Like, it's a little teeny spot right there, right? Look up here, like a little teeny spot right here, you know? And this is incredible. Look at this roof. Look how many layers you see. So there's the wood, the cedar, you have the vapor barrier, you have the aluminum, you have this high density PET foam core. Remember, that's the incredible stuff that they use for the floors and what, you know, where we've put the load on everything. And then it's arched. Come look at this one over here, because this is really cool you can see right here, see how they have this arched up, and then you can see there's the batten insulation inside of it. So it's really impressive.
This is the only product that's used in any RV trailer that is one piece, and this can be made any length, any size, any thickness. It's tailor-made specifically for our trailers.
Yeah.
And by being seamless, we can design the chassis to best fit the needs of the trailer and not have to worry about the materials that we're putting on top of the chassis.
Yeah,
so a lot of campers, they got to have their cross members specifically located to match up with the seams. And then whenever there's a seam, you can have different elevations, and it's a place for cold or transfer to come through. This here is one complete single piece, so we got zero cold transfer. And then the biggest thing that people aren't going to realize, but it allows us to put holding tanks where we want to put them. Allows us to design the chassis the strongest chassis with no limitations.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about the seams of the plywood or other materials, but every trailer I've seen is primarily a plywood floor.
Yeah. Like an OSB, plywood.
Usually OSB and things like that. I know there's been some composites, but like I said, at best they're a 4x8 sheet. As far as I'm told, we're the only trailer manufacturers that uses this material. This is exclusive to this.
And you know that because you purchase it from them, and they tell you that
they
you're
tell
the
us
only
that. Yep.
RV manufacturer
we're
that
the only
purchases
ones.
it. But it's also extremely expensive.
Very expensive, but the quality benefits justify the expense.
And the R value on this guy is roughly
our 13. But again, it's thermal properties. It's the one piece, zero seams, no thermal bridging. So you know, there's no thermal bridging. We got no voids, and so it's a complete.
Because if you're like sticking plywood together, you're going to have a crack.
Anywhere where you got a seam, and you know, plywood has no R value. So then they'll take plywood, they'll frame up like a wall, but lay it flat on the floor and have insulation between each little rafter, joist, floor joist.
Yeah.
And then every floor joist is going to be a cold transfer spot. So you get a much warmer, and it's the strength. The strength of this is, I think, 5 times stronger than wood.
Yeah.
And 50% lighter than wood. And
lighter and stronger. And it's waterproof, right?
100% waterproof, 100% synthetic, floats, it can't bug, mildew, won't rot ever.
Yeah.
Bugs can't do anything to it. So
yeah. That's cool. So no rotting, no molding.
It'll never rot. It'll outlast.
Never rot.
It'll outlast everything else about the trailer.
Yeah, for sure.
You know.
I actually had somebody on YouTube like make the comment of like, they were asking about one of the trailers we had. They're like, what's the floor? And I was like, plywood. And they're like, well, when you're dragging it through the river and like getting water all over it, is just gonna rot.
Right.
You know, and I was like, yeah, that's true. Like,
Yep.
that makes sense, right? And so that's really cool. So this literally will hold up to the elements forever.
Yeah. Hot, cold, water, moisture, mud, dirt.
Well,
grime.
that was interesting, is because that's kind of like last night after I went back, I was thinking about just everything you were sharing, and Jordan and I were talking, and he's like, it feels like some of the things you do in like the standard could be unnecessary, like because the honeycomb or the, you know, has like a 10-year UV, but you put a fiberglass over it to protect it.
Yep.
And I'm like, but most trailers are okay if their roof only lasts 10 years.
Right.
I was like, it feels like some of the things you're thinking is like, I want it to last forever.
Yeah, and I don't really care about what the RV standards are, the industry standards.
Yeah.
We're not a standard company.
Yeah.
We don't build a standard trailer, so we're gonna follow our own standards.
Yeah.
And our standards are higher than the industry standards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we hope our end consumers, the people that purchase these trailers, have the same standards that we have.
For sure.
Because the industry standards are subpar.
Ceiling's another great example. The flooring and the roof are two things that people just don't comprehend. We do them so differently from everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same with the roof. You know, again, the same. Your industry standard roof is going to be plywood. Pretty much every RV trailer you're going to see out there is going to have, just like the floor, a wood roof.
Yeah.
A plywood roof, usually real thin, 3/8 of an inch, sometimes even thinner. Here we're using the same material as that we use in the floor. It's the PET core. It's got the woven fiberglass top and bottom skin.
Yeah.
And so it's got the same.
It's one piece. It's woven into it, so it's not laminated together.
Not laminated together. It's extruded, and so if it's not laminated, it can't delaminate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And again, it's waterproof, extremely strong, much stronger than wood, much lighter than wood.
We know that and believe that.
Yeah.
After putting a 2,000-pound hot tub on the roof.
The strength is, so just like a house.
Yeah.
You know, a home is only as good as your foundation.
Yeah.
And a trailer is a little unique, where the foundation's got to be good, but the roof is also equally critical in the strength of a trailer.
Yeah.
Same with a house. The roof is
what kind of
like
holds
the
it
foundation.
together.
I mean, the foundation keeps your house from falling over, and the roof is what keeps you dry.
Yeah.
Same concept in the trailer. With our design, the roof in the chassis, the floor system, is where all the strength of the trailer is. And so we over-engineer the roof for multiple reasons. One is strength. We're inviting people to go up onto the roof. We got the rooftop tent, and you know, we got racks and things that the end user can use. But then also, even if there was no reason to go on the roof, it's the strength of the roof is what holds the walls together.
Yeah.
And so you'll see when we do assemble the walls, they're kind of a floppy noodle in a sense until the roof goes on.
Yeah.
And the roof is what really ties it all together, and that's what makes it the rigid box that it is. And if you really want to make a nice video, roll one down a hill.
Uh-oh.
I'm fairly confident it's going to hold up pretty well.
I was terrified to put that hot tub up there. Because there's not a trailer in the world that I could think of that I would do that. Because I walk on roofs all the time, and I'm like, okay, there's the stud, and I'm like stepping from stud to stud, right? And when you walk on this, it feels solid all the way across, and I'm like,
I'd put a truck up there. I wouldn't even think twice, at all.
Well, that's what happened.
If I can figure out a good way to get a truck up there.
I was asking
a big
Steve,
forklift.
I asked Steve, I called Steve, I'm like, do you think we could put like 2,000 pounds on the roof? And he's like, oh, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. And then I called you, and you're like, I think it can handle it.
Yeah,
and I was
no
like,
problem.
okay. And then we did it.
You know, and that's just a lot of it's just the design. I mean, the materials that we use, along with the design. It's a fairly simplistic design, but it is kind of designed like a bridge, where we pre-tension the aluminum trusses.
Yeah, which is we can see right here,
Yep.
right?
And so the aluminum trusses, we actually, when we fabricate them, we create an arch to them, and then this material, when we bond this to it, wants to pull back on that arch, and so you end up with a pre-tension arch system.
Okay.
That's where all the strength comes in.
Yeah.
So
And it's also good for runoff and all of the
yep, the radius,
obviouses,
the
right?
runoff, the obvious reasons you want a radius roof, moisture runoff, but it also creates a cavity for added insulation and for wiring and routing of things. So that's another reason for the arch, but a big part of it is strength. That's what makes it so strong.
Yeah.
So
Well, what's really neat is like you mentioned there's no wiring in the walls at all.
Zero. Yep.
Zero wiring in the walls, which I know, like, not that you recommend it, but somebody that's not trying to get to 40 below zero, they want to like sometimes bracket things like for carrying max tracks.
Yep.
And so, I mean, like, to me, if there's no wiring, you don't have to worry tremendously about.
You can mount pictures, coat hooks, anything
Yeah.
where you want. You're not going to ever hit a wire.
Yeah.
But the real reason behind it is so that we have less, if any, holes. We don't want to compromise the insulation. The
Yeah.
walls are the thinnest.
Yeah.
The walls are thin, and so we want to maintain the thermal integrity throughout all 5 sides of the wall.
That makes
And
sense.
the roof being as thick as it is, we still got our insulation, all of our insulation values there. Because it's so thick, we got room for wiring. We still got all the insulation, and then there's batt insulation in there as well.
And they've used this, they designed this for light rail flooring,
Yeah, this was
right?
originally created about 20, 22 years ago, the light rail train system. So
Yeah.
like in a lot of the major metropolitans, the light rail trains,
Yeah.
they were looking for a lightweight alternative to steel or aluminum, something that was a composite material that would last forever.
Yeah.
And that was extremely strong to handle all the foot traffic, and that it would routinely gets throughout the day.
Yeah.
Plus something that was strong enough to mount seats and things like that too. And so the creator of the product was commissioned to create something, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
And they created this, they basically invented it for that purpose.
Yeah.
And since then, it's used, companies like us, specialty products, because of its thermal properties, it performs really well for
Insulation.
refrigerated van trailers and things like that.
That makes sense.
Real high end, so.
The sandwich is also so important. There's so many pieces that go up to make the whole, not just the PET, but the way we build that.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to everything that we built. The roof system, the wall systems, and each layer that we do all has a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, in the roof, this high density foam that we see here runs continuously as one sheet through the entire roof.
Yeah.
No seams, and the aluminum is a conductor. So cold, heat, and hot will conduct through aluminum quite easily. So you can see here, our first thermal break from the outside elements is our foam core here. And then we have the open space, airspace with insulation. That is the next line of defense.
Yeah.
We do have our aluminum framing. In between the framing, of course, is our 1.5-inch high density foam as well. And our aluminum frame is a conductor of the hot or cold.
Yeah.
And then the last line of defense is this layer of insulation that goes the whole thing. So you'll never, ever, 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 ever see condensation, frost lines, anything on. You'll never see where a stud is. I know you've done some thermal cama. You can't see where the
studs are. Well, and that's incredible, is because now as you're explaining everything, I'm thinking like plywood, like you're gonna have every 4 feet.
Yep.
Because most trailers are 8 feet. They probably use a single piece or something. And every 4 feet, you're gonna have a seam, seam. And then I've never, usually most trailers, it's just a piece of paneling right there.
Right directly to the stud.
You're literally, your plywood, which has almost no R value, it goes through there, hits the stud, which is conductive,
right,
and then goes to paneling.
And aluminum will actually, not only is conductive, but it will accelerate it. So it's almost worse. It'll like even accelerate it to the interior. This little line here, there's a couple other high-end coaches, high-end Class A motorhomes that adopt a method similar to this. Noise, quality, and then they're $1 million coaches.
Yeah,
and
you
so
spend $1 million on it.
Spend $1 million, you're going to expect that. So we apply that for the cold and the hot performances.
That's amazing.
The sole reason. And you get that solid wall. Everywhere you touch inside the unit is
it feels so solid. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yep.
So you can buy an XPLORE or spend $1 million.
Yeah. It's starting
to get
at
similar,
$1 million.
starting at $1 million, $1 million and up. So you can go get a nice coach for $1 million and have construction like this. or an Xplore. Those are kind of your options for these types of quality.
This type of quality.
Yeah, if you want this type of quality, the practices, the methods of how you're doing it, right? You don't see this.
You don't,
on anything
not in travel trailers at all. The drawback, it takes longer to produce, costs more to produce, more challenging to produce. There is a layer of a vapor barrier between the foam and the aluminum as well.
Yeah.
So that again, because we do have wood paneling and decorative wood, we want to keep any moisture away from that and keep it a dry environment inside the trailer.
Yeah. I've been in it at -5 degrees. I've been in it at like 105 degrees. And it's for sure, the insulation is more and more I'm impressed by it. I'm falling in love with the Xplore.
we've been in them, we've used them in the 40 below, 42, 44 below, numerous times.
Yeah.
And that's not a claim, it's not a false advertising.
Yeah.
Hot shower at 42 below, no problem.
That's amazing.
So if we could get temperatures to go colder, if Mother Nature will help us this winter, we could document and prove even colder temperatures. We're confident it'll happen.
Yeah. You don't get much below -40 out here?
Oh, we do.
You
It
do.
just didn't happen last year. We've used the same type of construction for many years. And the coldest I personally have spent 5 days in the trailer in the frigid north, and 55 below zero was the coldest. And the warmest it got in those 5 days, at the hottest point of the day, was -12. The average, I would say, was about 30 below for those 5 days. Myself, my wife, my 2 daughters at the time, I think aged 6 and 3, so, and my dog.
And your dog?
We were cozy, comfortable, no problem.
Holy, were you fishing?
We were.
Out fishing?
Yep. And then we went dog sledding. And, yeah, I mean, winter sports. We love winter sports. And if anything, this is better construction, better methods than that trailer. So I'm very confident.
That
it'll
was years
perform
ago.
Even
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, that was over.
That was years ago. So that comes automatic to us. That's cold weather operation is in our genes. Trying to do anything other would be a challenge. So that comes natural to us as construct things.
Yeah.
And then the handles, like you've proven, it can handle the cold, it can handle the heat.
Yeah.
Equally.
No, it makes sense. And the AC unit turns on and off.
Yeah.
Right? Which
Yeah.
my previous trailer that I had on 90-degree weather,
Yeah.
it never turns off.
Right.
It just runs continually.
Yep.
Which then the AC unit usually freezes up, and I got to turn it off and thaw it out and turn it back on.
Yep.
Which is it's not fun when you're out camping and it turns off and then it becomes like a hot box, right?
Right, yep.
Sauna, and then you got to leave and sit outside to get cool because your trailer's too hot. And then, yeah, when we ran the AC, it never froze, and I had it set to 60 degrees.
Yeah.
It got to
hang meat
60.
in there.
It was 62 degrees inside the trailer and like almost 100 degrees outside. It was freezing. Like I went in there and I started shivering. I was like, I need a jacket.
That blows the whole dynamic out of the water, because isn't it only supposed to be 11-degree difference between the air conditioning?
Yeah. Technically, I think it does drop it. I think it's 18 degrees.
Yeah, 18 to 20
So
degrees.
in order to get it colder like you did,
Yeah.
that much colder is you only would achieve in a trailer like this.
Yeah, it's because
you could put the largest air
like a
conditioner
refrigerator.
you can imagine on a traditional built trailer, and it's only going to drop it. I think 18. I have to look 15 to 18 degrees. Might even be less.
No, I think it's probably around there. Because I mean, I'm just speaking from experience of driving motorhomes across the country.
Yep.
Because I used to buy a lot in Florida, and if it was 100 degrees outside, it was hard to get it down into the 70s.
Yeah.
But I could.
Yep.
But it took a while, and it usually took over. It was what it was usually is in the night when it got cool, I would crank it on and keep it
Sure.
cool.
Get all the
inside.
substrates cool. And,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah, and that was like the only way to get it to a nice temperature was by, but starting at a hot temp and bringing it down was so hard. And we did. We started at like 100, I mean, it was over on one of our tests. I think we started at like 100 degrees and dropped it down, and it got frigid.
There was that heat wave about 7 or 8 years ago in Elkhart. They were doubling up air conditioners on coaches, and customers were still complaining that they couldn't get their coaches cool.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Not going to run anymore, you know.
Yeah, we do like our sit-down interviews in a fifth wheel that we have at our lot that we got in as a trade-in. We've been doing some sit-down interviews, and we crank that AC on in the day, and it's just like, It's not getting cold in there. We need to start doing the interviews in the Xplore. we just like have a group of people, so we need some more space. We want to try to get it into like a refrigerator, see if we can get the temps down. But it only goes to 55.
Right, yep.
I know, and I was like, well, maybe we set it to 55 and then open the freezer and let the freezer
You could hot wire it where it'll just run.
Well, it's just run and run and run and run.
It'll just, it'll be a freezer.
50 would be pretty amazing. If it's 105 outside, that's almost a...
I set it at 60 and it dropped down to 62, no problem. Yeah. But it was too cold, so I increased it to 70. Right. I didn't think of going down because I was like, this is not... I was trying to create a real world experience, but I was like, this is too cold. I would never camp in 62 degree, like inside the trailer. So I'm like, I'm gonna bump it up to 70, because that's actually what would be normal. And even 70 felt too cold. I went in there and I'm like, no, this is like, if I was going to bed, I might actually bump it up to
75 or something. Usually that 15 degree, no matter what temperature is outside, you know, when it's 100, even if it's 85, that's feels good compared to 100.
Compared to, no, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, it's all about thermal break.
That's the key.
No matter what you're constructing, the thermal bridging is the enemy.
Yeah, that makes sense. We did a test a long time ago, which we were so stupid when I look back at it, where we did some insulation in a box, but the frame went out and sat on the ground. So the cold just came up and entered the box. And I was just like, it's dumb.
You learn something though.
You learn, right? That's it. And I guess that's the difference is when you live up here and you build cabins, you worked in building cabins.
Residential construction, cabins and homes. And
but mine as a builder, and I had never heard of how you weave
weave the insulation for studs. And you got a thermal bridge. Any stud, no matter what material it's made out of, is a bridge.
Yeah.
And stopping that bridge is key.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you see it in the construction of this building.
Yeah.
You don't see any of the framing.
Yeah.
Because they got to stop that thermal bridging, you know?
Yeah.
And so...
They don't build that, like, that's not how they do it in Utah.
No, that's in most places of the country, not just in this region.
Yeah.
You know?
We do 2x4s, and then we put the batten insulation and just staple it. Staple it in there.
Well, and there's some science behind that where a steel stud building or house or a trailer, aluminum stud, depending on the spacing of the stud and the thickness of the stud, dimension of the stud, your insulation value between the studs can be brought to 0. So it's almost as if you didn't put any insulation in.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, there's some, I don't know them off the top of my head, but there is some calculations.
Because your studs, they're bringing almost enough.
In and it can accelerate the cold. And so if you've got a stud cavity that's 16 inches wide, but you've got big hollow
aluminum
tubes every 16 inches, and if there's no thermal break, you would 0 performance difference. You could take that insulation out of the wall completely, and you won't notice
because it offsets it. Because it's like that makes sense, and that's kind of what that's what happens with so many trailers, aluminum trailers. These people that like full time are boondocking them, they're like, a lot of them are like, don't buy an aluminum trailer because it just conducts right through. Yeah. Right. So
that's like a lot of RVs. They use that foil.
Yeah.
That real thin foil.
Yeah.
And that's their thermal break, and then it's radiant. I mean, yes, it is effective.
Yeah.
But not
as effective.
It's not sufficient for.
Well, I've seen is like
season.
fifth wheels, like some of these big fifth wheels that are 4 seasons, Arctic package, right?
Yeah.
It's plywood, and then you have the frame, and then corrugated coroplast, piece of plastic. That's it. There's nothing.
No.
Like, because we've dropped the plastic, and we're like, there's the plywood, there's the floor right there. It's like
not.
Or sometimes they'll like staple a piece of plastic to the underneath of it, right? So you have a piece of plastic, plywood. But what they do is they get a 40,000 BTU furnace, and a lot of times they'll duct that heat down into there and just blast the underbelly with heat. And it's like, well,
that's
works.
ways to keep it warm, but it's not entirely all about just insulating factor. People aren't going to be, I'm in the small group of people that are going to go camping at 50 below 0.
Yeah.
You know? So the value isn't necessarily entirely just for people that want to experience extreme elements in the cold. it's the type of construction, in order to achieve that, means everything's going to be more rigid, stronger, better quality.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
It's kind of like the byproduct. The byproduct of building a trailer that can handle 40 below, because some customers will be like, that's not me. I live in a desert, I'm never going to be in the cold, never going to be in the extreme hot, whatever the scenario is.
Yeah.
So the insulating value in its properties and the true four-season, capabilities of the trailer, the byproduct of that is just quality.
Yeah.
And so you get that part for free, kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
So even if you're not going to utilize the cold weather aspect of the trailer or the hot weather aspect of it, you're going to still benefit from just the strength of the trailer.
Something that I'm like assuming into the future is that everything is going to last longer. Like your furnace is going to last longer when it turns on and off constantly.
Absolutely.
Your AC unit is going to last twice as long when it's turned on and off, right?
Absolutely.
It's just like we have a trailer where when I go out camping and the furnace runs continually.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and it will shut off because it overheats.
Right.
Right? And it's like
fuel. So everything should operate a lot more efficiently. The air conditioner, the heating system, everything. Your batteries will last longer because it's not trying to
it's not
run those items,
cranking it 24/7.
Yeah.
So I feel like the longevity of everything in the trailer is going to outperform and outlast most things because it's not. It's just like an engine. If you rev it at 6,000, 7,000 RPMs all the time climbing, you overheat and the engine blows up, right? That's essentially what some of these trailers do with poor insulation. It just overworks every component.
Yeah. Well, and then you see other issues too when a trailer gets too hot inside. Some materials aren't rated for the temperatures that
and they start falling apart.
Or the other way around. You get, even in storage, even if you got your trailer in storage and the hot and cold throughout this winter season, you get a lot of frost and condensation that builds up, even if you're not occupying it.
Yeah.
And then even in storage, and that's hard on things. You go into the trailer after it's been stored all winter, and you open the door and it smells like grandma's attic. Bad, right?
Yeah.
And you won't experience that so much in this trailer because you're never going to get that condensation. You're not going to get frost or anything in the inside. Even in storage mode. So it's a drier, more stabilized climate inside the trailer, inside the walls, inside the ceiling, in the places you can't see.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so there's a lot of benefits beyond just the actual cold weather performance.
Yeah.
Because the reality of it, not everybody is going to need, or maybe they don't live in an area or go to a place where they're going to need that cold weather
extreme
performance.
Cold. But I think everybody in America, everybody hits hot weather, and everybody hits, a guy locally by us up in Park City.
Okay.
He chose to buy the Xplore because he's like, he just wants to go out and camp in 20-degree weather.
Yeah.
And we told him, well, that trailer, all the water lines are underneath it, so it's going to freeze.
Yeah.
So you can't.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not extreme, right?
No.
That's 20 degrees.
That's 20 degrees. That can happen almost anywhere in this country.
Anywhere, exactly.
Look at Texas last year.
Yeah, well, and another person, I was talking to him, and I was like, they live over in Oregon, and they're like, well, do we need to winterize it? And I'm like, well, what's the climate like? And they're like, well, it very rarely goes under 32 degrees. We might have a week where it stays in a low as 20 or, and maybe almost creeps above 30 in the day. Only 1 week out of the whole year. Sure. And I'm like, if I were you, I'd go out there and turn on the heat for 1 week.
Yeah.
And then turn it off.
Yeah.
Because there's no point of running antifreeze through it if that's all you ever hit. You can if you want to, but it's just kind of like, I wouldn't personally if that was my climate. So it's kind of like, I don't know. To me, the insulation is going to work good for heat or cold, no matter what.
Well, there's a lot of winter activities that I enjoy, and I'm sure a lot of people enjoy. It makes it hard when if you got to travel, to go cross country skiing in your favorite spot in the mountains, and then you got to drive all the way back to town to stay in a hotel.
Yeah.
Here you can bring everything with you, and
the confidence factor is nice. You've got it in your back pocket.
Yeah.
You're good.
Or
heat or cold.
Yeah, hot or cold.
Yeah.